And the Komenda Sugar Factory is back in the news. Both leading figures in the two main political parties, the incumbent President Nana and the former President John Mahama, have been at it in the last 1 week talking about the Komenda Sugar Factory. It is a factory that John Mahama's administration built that has not produced a single ounce of sugar. But why? But then there's a talk about reviving it. Well, we have spent millions of taxpayers' funds already to build this. The consensus is we can't leave it to rot. This government says they're doing a lot about this. The former president claims that it has been abandoned. But the fundamental question to probe tonight is how, as a country, do we get the Komenda Sugar Factory up and running again? That's what we've been talking about and checking what politics has to do with its current state. Now, what do we know so far? We know that we spent as a country $36.5 million on this. It's a loan that we took. A key question that comes to mind is, this was a loan we took. Are we paying this loan now currently? Especially when it's not produced any sugar for the past 5 years, because we're going to make money from this to pay off the loan. And since it's sitting there idle and it's a loan, are we paying the loan? That it's a major hole, and therefore in a country where resources are pretty hard to come by. Now, the president has been speaking about this. Remember that he is touring the Central Region, and he's talking. He promised that the people of Central Region, that government will, he says, operationalize the Komenda Sugar Factory, and he's given us a timeline to this in the first quarter of 2022. So that's a hard timeline that the president has given, within which he says government wants to bring this particular factory back up and running. Now, he says the entire project was overvalued by the John Mahama administration, and that government will not look on for the funds to go waste. And so that's another comment he's making on this. Now, he gave us a bit of detail about the process leading to the revival of this particular entity. Bids was invited. Many companies indeed submitted bids, but one of the companies that was shortlisted and selected failed to meet some of the conditions, and the contract had to be cancelled as a result of that. And so we are back to a point where, we did need to start the process afresh, so to speak. And so that's where the government is. But it's very confident that this will be done and the company back up and running next year, first quarter. Now, it says the approach used by the former president. Again, this is something that he's been very particular about the approach that the former administration adopted in establishing this particular factory was against every business principle. And he used an analogy of building the roof first before you build the foundation. That for him is the best comparison he can offer to explain what happened to the Komenda Sugar Factory. Now, John Mahama himself has also been speaking, because remember, this is his project that he put up. He says the current government simply abandoned the factory because it wasn't part of their priority. And that, quote, "I am not that foolish to set up a factory and have no plan for provision of raw materials." So what did he really do then to make sure the raw material was available? The reason why the factory is currently not functioning. This is his explanation. He claims that the Indian government offered to assist with the project, right? And the government was to now, having set up the factory first, later apply for a $24 million support for sugar cultivation from the Indian government, right? But then the question needs to be asked. There was no guarantee that you're going to get a $24 million if it was a process that you need to apply for. So why do you then build the factory first? It's a question that we need to ask, and we'll ask that question tonight. The current government, however, failed to apply, he says, for the funds that he claimed was there, apply for, get it, grow the sugarcane, and then use that to run the factory, provide raw material. Again, the question is, if this fund was there for us to apply for, why didn't this current government chase this and apply for it? We'll get into that tonight. Now, the reason why this is important, and that why the Komenda Sugar Factory cannot be left untouched and for it to rot. We're in a country where jobs are pretty hard to come by. And look at the number of jobs it will create if it's working. 7,300 jobs. Very important. Plus, we're talking about production capacity of 1,250 tons of sugar. Many experts around the world say sugar, it's gold. Everybody eats it. You need it in products. We have all these confectionaries. You have fizzy drinks, and they produce them locally. Can you imagine the difference this will make to the industry? They don't have to import sugar in the tons that we do currently anymore. The foreign exchange savings that we'll make. So this is big for an economy like ours. And so we're going to be talking about that. And then we have, for example, the other benefits, okay, that the Komenda Sugar Factory will give us if indeed it's operational. We are talking about using part of the residual outcomes of this for the power grid. So this is a pretty integrated project that needs to come upstream. And that's what we're talking about this. What has politics really got to do with it? My guests are joining me after this break. We'll get into this. If you live in the central region, this is key for you. But if you live anywhere else in the country, this has implications for jobs and the economy. Stay with me. And thank you for staying with us here on PM Express. And my guest joining me tonight via Zoom is Franklin Kujo. He is the president of Imani Center for Policy and Education. I'm grateful that he could join us. Also joining me tonight we have the deputy minister for the sector. I'm talking about the trade and industry sector, Michael Otri Berfi, will also join us, give us an update on where we are with the Komenda Sugar Factory and the processes leading up to its, as we've heard from the president, what will become a functional entity by first quarter of 2022. I will also be joined by Ransford Vaniamwa, who is the former member secretary, Komenda Sugar Project Management Board, on this very important subject. Before we go into any of that detail, my colleague Jojo Kobana was recently at the Komenda Sugar Factory. We want to first take a look at where we are currently with that particular factory and what he found when he went there, visited the factory, spoke to people around it, just to get a sense of where we are with it and what the community members say about it. Watch this.
This is the factory that is supposed to be producing sugar for the country, but it has been idle for 5 years. The roof is rusty and worn out. Before we get into the details of the current state of the factory, let's trace how Ghana found itself in this situation. It may sound basic, but Ghana had a dream to start producing sugar locally. Hence the rebirth of the Komenda Sugar Factory. The old factory, built in 1964, became defunct about 30 years ago. A loan of $36.5 million was invested into the factory. Resuming operations at the factory was a perfect opportunity to do things right this time around and cut down on Ghana's importation of sugar.
So as I speak, every single cube of sugar, every single grain of sugar that we eat here in Ghana is imported from outside. Komenda is going to change that. It is my honor and my pleasure to declare the Komenda Sugar Factory duly inaugurated.
Excitement created the commissioning of the sugar factory in 2016.
The inauguration of the Komenda Sugar Factory will provide jobs. It is estimated that in full production, this project will provide direct and indirect jobs to an estimated 7,300 people.
Unfortunately, the facility shut down in July 2016 because of inadequate sugarcane. It was due to reopen in October 2016, but never did to date. Since then, there has been a flurry of promises to get the factory running.
Because sema kasisia ye ntuswa kasisia ye ema factory to me the amount of land we need for the sugar the type of sugar we can grow here. All those things were not properly organized. I think our organization, our organization, and also the between strategic investor, and also it to me about Bisomu. Nanche, Ubati Papa free menum, and check.
But it took 2 years before the government announced a new investor for the sugar factory.
All this factory, like any other factory, will keep on needing ongoing investment, ongoing retooling, and if that is done, definitely it will keep running and it will bounce back.
When are you starting work?
We are waiting for the final agreements to happen. After that, we'll start working.
It is past the second week of August, and the Komenda Sugar Factory remains closed. Currently, the facility is in terrible shape. A comparison of the factory in 2016 and 2021 shows the factory is deteriorating. There sits the Komenda Sugar Factory in its rusted glory. It has been abandoned for so many years. It is not producing sugar. And there are so many youth in the community needing jobs, and they have none. The plates and rakes that would carry the sugarcane for crushing have rusted. The new investor would have to spend more money to revive a new factory that was shut down just months after commissioning. A journey to the roof with a drone reveals further deterioration. Parts of the roof are rusted, worn out and torn. The roof is riddled with holes, and with the onset of the rains, it is obvious the rains seep into the factory. A group calling itself Concerned Citizens of Komenda is upset. Their convener, Samuel Awuja, is dismayed.
I quite remember about last 2 years, the Trade Minister, Honorable Ahunkalinsi, said the traditional area should look for land. We've been able to do that. We've been able to secure about 3,500 acres of land, and that is even far beyond the expected 2,000. So as for the land we already have, it's now left to the government to come and operationalize. So anybody who talks about sugarcane and land issue, it's a non-starter. They shouldn't even go there, because we have land available, and then the sugar plantation was also done. You know, it takes 6 months for the sugarcane to be ripe for the factory. When the government came in, it's been 5 years.
The land reserved for the cultivation of sugarcane around the factory has been left fallow, and along the beaches of Komenda are people yearning to be employed once the factory is reopened. Joseph Eshen is unemployed. His friends, who could not stand the pressures of unemployment, have migrated to Accra and other parts of the country, hoping to get non-existent jobs. Sharing their disillusionment and absolute displeasure, the residents pleaded with the president to fulfill his promises.
What no kwisi na sise we yedwuma sugar factory or musu pa dey taxpayers money and aben akwohwe se we baby no da ba be dem adis wo won wie na aben fofo abada no so watu na adwumo dem akona aben da ogbe no watu na adwumo ho na adnis wo na adno rust aben wadi ehwemo bebre agofo adu na aben wadi ehwemo bebre alba bet na the promise akohwe promise ngotin. Everybody know the promise I could shoot and say I could find what you remember, especially a commander for what you remember. As the Komenda Sugar Factory about to the man. I no what Jim one cast on crowdy. She said, I didn't one day say I ben biba. Never I did this one. Yeah, I've been for bar. I don't continue. You know what you had no more. She said, Ghana, damn no about the man. A kawana, she said, Ghana. This is Ghana. Kawa busi akwa bobo na na ni yada ba ye muntu ye nwie ma bafo abama no so am so dem me ya listen o ye wankasa o ma fix your sugar factory man na ye rose.
Now we are doubting them so much, and we don't believe them. The fact is that for a first term of office 4 years and a second term of office, all this was strategic investor. It has been given to strategic investor. At least, of course, we are young guys here, and such promises have been coming and gone, and we are not seeing anything. So for now, we don't trust them.
Sugarcane farmers are also disappointed. The secretary of the Sugarcane Farmers Association, Azekwaku says his members are now frustrated because they have to give all the harvested sugarcane to Akpeteshi distillers at heavily discounted prices. This is because the supply of sugarcane is more than the current demand.
One answer no water. One answer one dozen. Kumebi no water so water on credit basis. Until my farmers in his cover there also winning. Until my marketing your correct into Wutu I shouldn't do. Says you yedi yo. Idi yo pa yes indi yo ano yiza yidi yo. Or yo ne yezi in there. It may be any key ha. Na aduma ejuma wode ejuma bi sia anka na expect na anka government wutum obey obotum aboa ma factory no farmer no factory no wotum edimu ma farmers nso yotum yeska.
They have more raw materials than ever anticipated, so they do not pay the farmers on time. Revival of the Komenda Sugar Factory would not affect them in any way. This is because they can always get the molasses from the factory to distill Akpeteshi. No crushing of sugarcane, thereby reducing their burden. So even though Akpeteshi distillers are benefiting from the abundant supply of sugarcane, they still want government to make the factory operational. The Member of Parliament for the Komenda Edna Egwafo Ebrim constituency, Samuel Atta Mills, asked the Trade Minister in Parliament when the factory would be operationalized.
The Ministry of Trade and Industry, working in collaboration with its transaction advisor PricewaterhouseCoopers Ghana Limited, is in the process of concluding the conditions precedent for the activation of the concession agreement with a selected strategic partner, Park Agrotech Limited, to commence operations at the Komenda Sugar Factory. Government has a right to terminate the agreement. But be that as it may, we are hoping that they will conclude and finalize the fulfillment of these conditions conditions precedent by August this year. And then once that is done, it paved the way for us to require the company to commence activation of the company before the end of the year.
Until the factory becomes functional, it will remain a museum of monumental wastage and failure. Jojo Kobner, JoyNews.
So that is the story of the Komenda Sugar Factory. Well, we've had an update today from the president himself, who was in the central region. He was clear that it hasn't been abandoned and it will be up and running first quarter of 2022. I want to bring in very quickly the Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, Michael Otrebefi, who joins us on the telephone line right now. Mr. Befi, thank you for your time here on PM Express. So please walk us through, first of all, where we are currently with the Komenda Sugar Factory. The president gave us a bit of a sketch on this, but there's a bit of work that I understand that your outfit, the ministry, has done on this already.
And discussion. I guess this is very important in the sense that it's a very strategic national asset and a business that we think will afford a lot of people, especially young people, the opportunity to get employment and also create an opportunity for Ghana to generate more revenue to help us develop this country rapidly. But what is important, we have to understand for me, is that the whole commissioning of the sugar factory, Komenda Sugar Factory, was done in haste, as far as we know, because we know for sure that a lot of work was not done on the factory, on the facility before it was commissioned. Talking about machinery, talking about raw material to be able to feed the factory, which is critically important. So when this government, led by Nana Adankwa Akufo-Addo, assumed office in 2017, January, the ministry at that time was headed by Honorable Alan Martin, who is still the minister, constituted a committee of experts to do an audit to find out what is happening on the ground. And after the audit, the conclusion was very simple. Clearly, showed that they were not ready to take off because we didn't have enough machinery in place. And what is also critically important, the raw material, it was not adequate because we are talking about a very huge national asset. We're talking about an investment that was about $36 million or $37 million investment. We need a lot of raw material to feed this facility, and that has not been done. So what government decided to do then was to appoint a transaction advisor, and government settled on PricewaterhouseCoopers. What they did was that their terms of reference was to look for a strategic investor who will come in either as an outright purchaser of the facility or to invest in the business. And back and forth, they reached or they agreed on Park Agrotech, which is an Indian partner and also a local partner to take care of that business. So that is what happened. And so not until that arrangement was done, the factory was not ready to take off. So we have to now look for a strategic investor, a very competent investor who has the financial muscles to be able to undertake this project. And that's what I said, that we settled on the Park Agrotech to undertake that project. They also decided not to do outright purchase. We were expecting that they do outright, but they decided not to do that, but rather to take a concession on that. They agreed to invest $28 million into the project. And that was the case. They were given up to the 31st of August, 2021, to reach an agreement with PricewaterhouseCoopers, to give us the way forward when exactly to start operations. As of now, that has not been done. And the ministry is in touch with them. But the board decided not to sit down. But the board, in conjunction or in consultation with the ministry, agreed to now convert this business into a one district, one factory, so that the government can revive it for it to, be able to take care of, government to take care of the facility, so that what we expect the facility to achieve, will be able to achieve. So that is what has happened over the period. As of now, I can tell you confident that at least very soon the minister will make a general statement on this issue. But as of now, we have a company called Park Agrotech, who is a strategic investor, but they have not taken off yet. Government is now running the business as a 1D, 1F company.
Okay, so when the president said you've had to abrogate a contract recently because the contractor didn't meet the conditions precedent, what was he referring to there?
No, exactly so, because the point is that, see, we gave Pricewaterhouse specific instruction or direction on the way to go with the strategic investor. They were given a timeline. They were supposed to reach a very good agreement by 31st of August this year. So we're expecting that at least after 31st of August, the factory will take off to be able to start producing sugar. And we didn't see that. So, government decided not to just wait and just sit there waiting for this investor to come in as and when they want to. So then we have agreed to now convert this business into a one district, one factory. So the government can now put in some investment to run the business. That's what's happening on the ground now.
Okay, so the agrotech company you mentioned, that contract has currently been abrogated.
That is so, because as I said, it is implied in the whole arrangement. They were given specific timelines by which time, that is 31st August, to come into an agreement. Because we are looking for, because we are not so happy to see a facility like that, lying waste and lying there unattended. And so the government was also very critical, and they were very specific in giving timelines to this advisor. I'm talking about the strategic advisor, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the strategic investor that was appointed to come out with a plan. And that was not. So then it was implied straight away that then the deal fell through.
So as we speak now, the new plan is that government has adopted the Komenda Sugar Factory under the
1D, 1F business.
Okay, and in reality, what does that mean? Does that mean the government is going to now finance it from regular taxes? What is it? What does that mean?
You know the 1D, 1F policy is a private sector-led arrangement. Government only serves as the facilitator. We give you the opportunity. The good news is that we are working with what we call partner financial institutions. We call them PFIs. These participating financial institutions are there to support 1D, 1F companies or people who want to invest in 1D, 1F companies to be able to get enough funds to run these businesses. The good news is that government also subsidize the interest on the loan or facility given to the promoters of this business. So now that is the 1D, 1F, so that way government can, through a private person can engage a participating financial institution, one of them, to be able to generate money to revive the business. That's exactly what we are doing. The point I want to underscore is that the 1D, 1F policy, it is not a government-owned business. It is a private sector-led business. Government only serves as a facilitator to be able to pave way for people to do business easily.
Okay. So are we still under this arrangement? Is government policy still at a private investor who will do an outright purchase?
Exactly. So if we wish, that's all we would prefer. But when we get somebody who will come in to take over the business and now run the business as a private sector business, that's because this party, I'm talking about the MPP party, which has formed the government, is a center-right party. We believe in such forms of business. So we will expect a private person to come in to take over the business so that that private person can run the business as a private business. And the government's interest in this will only to facilitate the arrangement so that you can get easy access to funds. I'm talking about facility from the banks and other things that will help you to be able to run the business well.
Okay. Now, one of the major challenges you face is the lack of raw material. What's the thinking in trying to solve that problem? That
is the most critical challenge now, and so government now is engaging other people also to venture into these outdoor schemes, because we should not only target the plantations in Komenda or around the enclave, but we should be able to spread it across the country. And so a lot of people have shown interest in trying to invest in sugarcane plantation across the country. And so government want to encourage them. So we will open the way for them and also facilitate the arrangement for those people to get funds to be able to set up these plantations. Because without that, we will not get enough raw materials to feed the factory.
John Mahama had said very recently that under his administration, the plan was that the Indian government had a $25 million facility that government was to apply for in the next phase after the construction and use that $25 million to now produce the raw materials to feed the plant, and that your government has abandoned that particular aspect of applying for that funds. Is that true?
It's the reality is that a 24.5 million line of credit was also initiated. But see, we don't set up factory before we look for raw materials. Clearly, it clearly shows that the whole process was dead at birth. And now setting up a factory before you take care of raw material, that clearly means that the whole arrangement was somehow, it was still dead at birth. So the point we are making is that our interest should be more on trying to generate people's interest in the area of plantation, in the area of looking for planting raw material to be able to feed this factory. So our interest as a government is not just to make sure that we operationalize the facility, but to make sure that we have enough raw material to feed the plant.
So if the $24.5 million line of credit was available, why didn't you access that?
It was part of the whole agreement. It was a top-up arrangement that they did with the Indian Exim. The arrangement was that they were to take a $35 million loan for the facility, and they would take a $24.5 million line of credit. But you see, as I have said, You're now going to look for 24.5 billion to start irrigation, trying to, do plantation, sugarcane plantation. For me, that clearly shows that you are not serious, or you didn't understand the whole process of business, because you cannot do business by, putting the cart in front of the horse. That doesn't happen like that. Naturally, it doesn't happen like that. What they should have done was to concentrate on trying to develop raw material to be able to feed the plant. But that was not done. That is why we think that they didn't think through the business well. And by the grace of God, we have come and we have done a very good audit of the whole arrangement. Now we know the areas that we have to tackle, and that's exactly what we are working on now.
Okay, I know Franklin Kujo with Imani, they did a policy paper on this at the time when the John Mahama administration was thinking about activating the factory. Mr. Kujo, you heard the latest on this from the Deputy Minister. What's your take on what you just heard?
Listening to the Deputy Minister, it is important to also make the statement that the new administration needed to do an audit, which was pretty much within their domain to do. But the claims of over, what was the word the president
overvalued, the project was overvalued.
I'm not too sure we side with that. I think the project was actually undercapitalized. As we noted way back in 2016, for this project to take off significantly and successfully, you needed not less than $90 million minimum. And this was a projection based on the 1970 study done by the World Bank and a number of experts, that to revive Komenda, even at that time, you needed close to $90 million as a minimum, which meant that all those attempts that the NDC government made, and I think the current government is also making, seemed obviously to fall short of the expected figure, which is why they are running into commissioning, which is why the NDC ran into commissioning challenges. And then the current government has also run into challenges even after the supposedly superior review. The fact of the matter is that it is true when the Deputy Minister says that the raw material obviously was a problem. At the time of recommissioning this project, at least the minimum hectares of land needed for sugarcane production or plantation should have been 1,000 hectares. In fact, the 1970 review suggests that for a full throughput, you needed not less than 7,000 hectares of land to grow sugarcane to be able to feed the factory. So when you start off like the NDC did with less than 150 hectares of land, definitely you run into problems. And don't forget, the areas they are looking to grow the sugarcane, as originally suggested, the Komenda and even the Suchare areas, have been significantly deteriorated in terms of the water quality, the soil quality, and the water profile, which meant that irrigation and husbandry challenges are bound to happen. Which is why and again, aside to the Deputy Minister, when he says that you needed significant funding or investment to revamp these assets to be able to ramp up, at least grow enough sugarcane to be able to feed the industry. It will be interesting to see what the Pricewaterhouse guys actually did and reasons for which they settled on a strategic investor, who seems to have also abandoned the project. Because if we saw what the Pricewaterhouse suggested that ought to be done, I'm not too sure they would have settled on the investor who somehow abandoned the project, because presumably this was a much superior review. It tells me one thing, that almost all the attempts made so far have fallen short of the original suggestion by the World Bank experts and of course international experts who studied the project, that you needed not less than $90 million to start the project. So this is where we are. The challenge again is that under the NDC, it looks as if the investors at the time, while undercapitalizing the project, they were overly estimating the returns. In fact, they estimated almost $20 million per annum. And that seemed to have been the only reason why they were trying to maybe justify their undercapitalization. But the NDC government invested $24 million. It's not 36, as the current government keeps saying. It's not 36 million. It's $24 million. And I think Mahama is right when he says that there were other lines of credit. But you see, the challenge with that type of analogy is that because the project at the barest minimum needed this significant investment, it wasn't clear when the other lines of credit, even if it was $24 million, was going to come in. And by the way, $90 million as of 1970, obviously, it's probably more than, probably about 100 million and over dollars currently. So however you look at it, both administrations seem to have fallen short. You can say that Mahama obviously started the foundation. And maybe, yes, he's right that it could have been continued after the audit had been done.
But fundamentally, Franklin, I just listened to the Deputy Minister say that, and the President as well, that you can build the factory like that when you don't have a clear idea of how you're going to supply that factory with the raw material, and that was the challenge they had.
Yeah, but that's true. So the point I'm making is that so the factory had been built, and we did say that as well, that the raw material obviously wasn't enough. Having realized that, I'm surprised that it's taken this number of years to get to this position. A position we obviously listed as going to affect the project after just 2 months of its commissioning. So if after almost 3-4 years, we realized this was the challenge, how on earth then do you settle on a strategic investor who then absconds? Because he didn't understand that he needed to invest in the raw materials. He didn't have the full, didn't he have the full, well, what are the prospectus given to the strategic investor? What was he asked to do? Because if raw materials, as we agree, raw materials obviously is a challenge. Presumably you'd have just moved on from that. So I don't know, but I feel strongly that this project, even if it can be salvaged, it must be done in such a way that clearly the land area required for growing sugarcane should be significant, probably 7,000 hectares. Otherwise, we'll be saddled with trying to import raw sugar and refine it in Ghana. Okay. And obviously, we can import sugarcane from Latin America, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I have with me Ransford. Ransford was on the board of the factory. Ransford, just before we move, can you explain why? Because let's go back to that fundamental problem that we, Franklin has said, why the decision was taken to build a factory when the raw materials was not available. What went into that thinking?
Evans, I do not understand why if somebody says that there was no availability of raw material. There were raw material available, but the full production raw material wasn't available because the capacity of the plant is 1,250 tons per day. But the outgrowers within the 100 kilometers radius, the western and central regions, they could give 500 to 700 tons per day. So, and the minimum, when you start the plant, you need to go to the minimum production rate of 150 tons per day. 150 tons. Bear in mind that this facility, it was not done by Ghanaians. We contracted a loan from Indian Exim, $35 million, and a counterpart funding of $1.5 million from the Ghana government through EDIF, now Exim Bank of Ghana. And the consultant to the project was the National Federation of Sugar Factories in India. So the consultants Indians, the contractors Indians. And India, the whole world, they are the second largest producers of sugar. There are over 500 sugar factories in India. So all the advisors, the policy, everything was done by these experts. Because we cannot claim that there's a Ghanaian or Ghanaians have expertise in this field.
But the question to ask you is...
So the question is that...
Even under John Mahama, he didn't produce sugar.
No, we produce sugar.
Really?
Yes.
Where was that sugar?
I said during the test run.
Yeah, but
No.
That's not what we are talking about. Talking about proper sugar.
No. Say that we did not do commercial production.
But that's the only conversation we are having.
No, but the fact is,
but you didn't produce. You didn't set up the factory to produce test sugar, to produce commercial sugar.
Listen,
but you didn't produce.
We
that
did
sugar.
not do commercial production.
Yes,
and I've said it everywhere.
But why?
But
why
for you
that?
to say that we did not produce sugar, that is
but
what I
you
want.
Produce sugar.
We produce sugar. I don't understand what you're saying.
What was the factory set up to do? To produce commercial sugar for commercial purposes.
Exactly. And I'm telling you.
So if I'm saying that, so when I say to you that you didn't produce sugar, that's what it is.
But you say we didn't do commercial sugar.
Okay, so let's use the term. Why didn't you produce commercial sugar?
Yes, because there were other. The plan was that we need to go through routine test run, the series of test runs. So the series of test runs were done, and we were earmarked to go into the full production. That's the commercial production in 2017. That was the plan, because there is a roadmap. You know, the factory, it was supposed to be completed in October 2016. October 2016. But in May 2016, the plant and machinery were completed. That is why it was commissioned for test runs. Do you get me? So 5 months ahead of time, the plant was completed. But other works were ongoing, the civil works were ongoing, which were all completed before November 2016. It was completed on scheduled time. But we did not do the commercial production because there were, the rains were still falling, because according to the expert, I'm not a sugar expert, but according to them, during the rainy season, you don't harvest sugar cane. So you don't do production of sugar during the rainy season. So I remember we issued a statement that we're going into the commercial production on the 29th of November.
And using what raw material?
The existing sugarcane outgrowers within the catchment area, because we had 3 main divisions, the sugarcane outgrowers. We have Komenda division, that's the outgrowers within the Komenda Edna Egua Fabre municipality. We had Putubil division, the Putubil division in the KEA, Chufu Atimokwa, Ehiman Lower Dintra. Then we had Swedru division. That's Aguna, Swedru,
all that
areas.
Combined, you said it was 100 and 500 tons of
yes,
sugar?
that's 500 to 700. That's what they could provide.
But you're talking about a factory with a capacity of
1,250.
Yeah.
That is why we secured a $24.5 million loan facility for the sugarcane development and outgrower scheme. And, we started...
Shouldn't you have done that first?
No.
Because there's an example with the Kumfi, right, a Kujus. They actually started, I remember when they actually started by first growing their pineapples. I remember watching that on television, growing their pineapples, and it took so long for the actual building of the factory to come along. By the time the factory came along, the pineapples were ready. They had the farms, and you could feed it. So isn't that how it's supposed to happen?
Evans, do you know that when they started growing pineapples in the Kumfi area, they were selling to Blue Skies? Are you aware?
Yes. Because the factory was not ready.
Organic sugar loaf. Yeah. Organic sugar loaf, which was done under John Dramani Mahamad's era, 2013. Honorable Samuel Sapon was the regional minister. He commissioned that project in partnership with Canadian government and the CEDECOM, Central Region Development Commission, under the Trade Ministry. They went into this cultivation. There was a specific variety of pineapple which they grew in that enclave, and they were selling it to Blue Skies. So if they were growing, so if we planted the sugar canes before constructing of the factory, where were you going to sell those sugar canes to? Because there was no factory to mill these canes.
Yeah, but so you rather have it. So you rather have the situation we have now, where the factory is sitting idle without the raw material.
Listen. You know
they have the raw material, which you can still sell it locally and possibly even export.
What I'm saying is, if we grow the sugar cane, maximum 9 months is ripe. And where are you going to sell those canes to? Even the available canes with the outgrowers, there's only few people who buy those canes.
Give me a second.
Distillers.
Yeah, we saw that in the video. Give me a second. Franklin has an interjection. Franklin?
Oh, well, I was just trying to say that of course, there was supposed to be a test run. And I remember that some cubes of sugar was showcased to the world, that those were the fruits of the plant. Presumably, the next phase was to get into ramp up to, commercial production. I mean, this was a plant that was supposed to produce almost at its full peak, 46,000 tons of sugar per year. The challenge and the reasons why we are worried, or were worried at the time, was that clearly the fundamentals had not been dealt with, which essentially was the raw material, which was why after almost 2.5 months, it ran into challenges. I think it's important to make the distinction that we all understand that yes, factories are supposed to be operating incrementally. But unfortunately, with Komenda, as I said earlier, not all the work that needed to have been done before it started operating was in place, which is why I also think that the current government maybe could have also pursued the continuation of the project and especially look at the people who brought the first tranche of the money and continue to engage them, rather than trying to engage some other entities and then having these same challenges that we are faced with.
We had the minister announce that this has been adapted under 1D, 1F, and that they're going to go ahead. The president gives a timeline of first quarter of 2020. Briefly, what will be your recommendation to get this working?
I mean, the point is that the whole idea of reviving Komenda was based on a PPP model, by the way. So I don't know whether, if you say that it's now under 1D, 1F, does it suggest that government will have a significant share than expected? Because I suspect the same PPP model is being utilized. It was the same PPP model that landed them with agrotech that promised $28 million. So are we now understanding that now that it's under 1D, 1F, is it still the case that at least we need to understand the percentage share? Is government going to be at the commanding height and take more, maybe 70%? Yeah. In which case, therefore, the question you asked for this conversation, whether it's politics, whether politics is the answer, if I should paraphrase, wouldn't go away. And that we are making decisions based on what we call strategic national assets, but in actual fact, using political analysis rather than economic analysis. But anyway, we wait to see how this project will pan out. I certainly think it's a good project. It must be done. But we need to go back to that drawing table, which suggested that as far back as 1970, you needed not less than $90 million to put this factory back into operation, fully operational.
Ransford, let me ask you, so we are where we are. You've been there at the board level. What would it take from your point of view, knowing the Komenda Sugar Factory, to get it back and up and running?
You know, talking about the raw material, you know, in 2016, we had official agreement with the Ceftec India Private Limited, the contractors who built the factory, to pre-finance the development of 125-acre nursery plantation, which that 125-acre nursery plantation would be transplanted onto a 2,000-acre farm. That 125-acre overgrew because when the new government assumed office, we were expecting that that $24.5 million, which was meant for the sugarcane development and irrigation, would be ready for utilization by February 2017. They didn't mine it because they did not have interest. In July 2018, the minister ordered the management at the time to sell the canes to Apeteshi distillers, 125-acre plantation. So I thought the deputy minister I saw on the line so that you ask them. And as I'm speaking to you, there's Ceftec India Private Limited, the contractors. They are demanding their monies and they are on arbitration with this, the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So what I think we need to do is to depoliticize these issues on the Komenda Sugar Factory. Because if the government had the political will to operationalize the factory, it wouldn't take them 5 years without planting a single cane, a factory that is supposed to buy canes from the art growers and supposed to also grow its own canes, is not now selling canes that are available to distillers of apartheid. So I believe the president should, or the government should have the political will to operationalize it. And let me
pull that to him just finally. Mr. Befi, do I still have you? Do I still have Mr. Befi? Okay. Well, so that's not your solution to the problem. Let's get the government. Well, the president has said today that they are committed.
I do not trust the government. No, I do not trust the president because he's made a lot of promises that he's not been able to fulfill.
Well, he's put a timeline to it, so we can hold him to it. Radford, thank you. Frankly, I'm grateful. Also, the Deputy Minister, Mr. Befi, also enjoy the rest of it.